Tuscany is one of my favorite places to visit in the entire world. It's a dream destination where rolling hills, sun-soaked vineyards, and medieval villages transport you to another time. I just returned home from a visit there, and there's nothing quite like enjoying world-class wines while overlooking vineyards, olive groves, and Italian cypress-lined roads. So in this video, I'm going to share 10 of my favorite wineries to visit when in Chianti Classico, which is a short 45-minute drive from Florence, and one of my favorite places to visit in Tuscany. Of course, even if you're not going to Tuscany anytime soon, this video will still be very useful for you, as I'm going to share my thoughts regarding the wines produced by these wineries, many of which are strong buys and which I buy from my own cellar. Located in Gaioli in Chianti, more than 500 meters above sea level, Castello di Ama is situated on extremely rocky soils. These rocky soils and high elevation vineyards combine to produce challenging conditions for grapes to grow, and the result is naturally low yields and wines with intensity and concentration that are some of the most enjoyable wines in all of Chianti Classico. This is also a fantastic place to visit if you're a fan of art, as they have contemporary artwork situated throughout the entire estate. And when you tour the estate, you get to see all of the various pieces of art prepared by top artists. Castello di Ama encourages artists to visit, and many of those artists are inspired during their visit and produce works of art that remain on the property after they leave. Castello di Ama rebuilt its primary winery building a few years ago, and this is where it does most of the tastings. This building itself is like a work of art. It's built primarily with a lot of the stones that are all over the property, but they also have several segments with floor-to-ceiling glass that provides breathtaking views of the stunning scenery below. Castello di Ama also has a hospitality group, so you can stay there as well. Of course, in addition to touring the winery and the estate, you'll get the opportunity to do a wine tasting. And I found the lineup to be extremely strong from start to finish. In fact, one of the wines, namely the Castello di Ama San Lorenzo Chianti Classico Gran Selezione DOCG, was one of my favorite wines from the entire trip. Located in Panzano in Chianti, Fontodi's vineyards are located in an area that's referred to as Conca d'Oro, or the Golden Shell. This area is widely considered to be among the very best places in all of Chianti Classico for the production of high-quality collectible wine. Fontodi has 130 hectares on their estate, 70 of which are planted to vine. Fontodi also raises cattle on its estate. This is the famous breed of cattle that's used to produce the bistecca alla fiorentina, which is the famous cut of beef that you can get when you're in Florence at a restaurant. In addition, Fontodi uses the manure from these cattle for preparations in the vineyard. Fontodi is a big proponent of organic and biodynamic practices, both in the vineyard and in the winery. During your visit to Fontodi, you can expect to get an entire comprehensive tour of the winery, including the barrel room and the production facility, as well as enjoying stunning aerial views of the Conca d'Oro and the vineyards below. I've been fortunate that during both of my visits to Fontodi, the winery was bustling with activity. Last November when I was there, they were bottling the Vigna del Sorbo, which is an outstanding Chianti Classico Gran Selezione, and last week when I was there, they were harvesting the fruit for the Flaccianello for the 2024 vintage, and also sorting that fruit, de-stemming it, and beginning the fermentation for that wine. The Flaccianello is the top wine produced by Fontodi, and definitely one that's the most coveted for collectors. This is an extraordinarily age-worthy wine, and it's definitely one that I highly recommend that you try if you haven't done so already. Following your tour, you'll enjoy a wine tasting, which is certainly a real treat, as all the wines produced by Fontodi are of extremely high quality. In addition to the Flaccianello that I discussed before, you'll most likely get a chance to taste their Chianti Classico, which is their most widely produced wine. If you have not yet tried a wine from Fontodi, I highly recommend the Chianti Classico, which is a wine that sells for a very fair price for a wine of that quality. It's also an extremely age-worthy wine, as we enjoyed a 2010 vintage last week that was still showing extremely well. As long as we're talking about Fontodi in Panzano, We should also talk about Il Molino di Grace as well, which is located very close by. The first time I visited Chianti Classico, my driver suggested that on the way to Fontodi, we do a quick stop at Il Molino di Grace as well, since we were ahead of schedule. I didn't have an appointment at Il Molino di Grace, and I just stopped in cold off the street, so they had no idea who I was, but nevertheless accommodated me and were extremely gracious and let us taste through the entire lineup, which was quite impressive. Il Molino di Grace has around 20 hectares of vines, and it's located in prime wine-producing area that's been used to produce wine in this Chianti Classico area for more than 350 years. I particularly enjoyed their Chianti Classico Gran Selezione, as well as the Vinsanto. So definitely if you're on your way to Fontodi, be sure to stop by at Il Molino di Grace as well. The aptly named Lamole di Lamole is located in Lamole, which is a high-lying hamlet located in the municipality of Greve in Chianti. The drive up to Lamole di Lamole is absolutely stunning, and there's some incredible scenery. It's also quite rugged, and I spotted a baby wild boar, or cingale, on the drive up, but unfortunately I wasn't quick enough to get a capture. Lamole has some vineyards that are located at the extreme upper limit for the production of Sangiovese in Chianti Classico, with vineyards at more than 650 meters above sea level. The vineyard tour at Lamole di Lamole was definitely one of the highlights, given the extreme high elevation and the stunning views of the scenery below, as well as the terraced vineyards and some of the old bush vines that date back more than 60 or 70 years. In addition, I happened to be there during harvest, and so they gave me some gloves, a pruning shears, and a bucket, and taught me how to harvest some Sangiovese manually. The perfectly ripe Sangiovese bunches that I harvested are going to be used in the 2024 Lamole di Lamole Chianti Classico. Following the vineyard tour and the lessons regarding manual harvesting, we also toured the winery and saw the barrel room and the wine production facility, including some of the historic aged bottles in the library, one of which dates back to the 1920s. Following a tour of the winery, we went to the Lamole restaurant, which is just a short drive away, and there we had an incredible multi-course lunch that paired perfectly with a number of the outstanding Lamole wines. So when you visit Lamole di Lamole, I highly recommend that you time your visit so that you'll be able to have lunch or dinner at their outstanding restaurant. Castello di Monsanto is a family-owned and operated winery that was founded back in the early 1960s. Monsanto is located in San Donato in Poggio, and they have 72 hectares of vineyards that are located between 280 and 320 meters above sea level. When you arrive, you'll be greeted by a very friendly and well-trained winery dog, and you'll also immediately be impressed by some formal gardens that include an impressive fountain. The tour of the vineyard will give you an appreciation for just how rocky the soils in Chianti Classico can be. But for me, the highlight of the visit to Castello di Monsanto was definitely the tour of the extensive cave network. This cave network provides ideal conditions for Monsanto to mature their wines, but they also use it to house their extensive collection of library wines. Monsanto is one of the very few producers in Chianti Classico that has an extensive collection of library wines. So if you're someone who's interested in getting birth year vintages, for example, you may want to give them a call. Their most iconic wine is the Castello di Monsanto Il Poggio Chianti Classico Gran Selezione. This is an extraordinarily age-worthy wine and one that's been produced every vintage since 1962. During my visit, I was able to try some very old vintages of this wine that were still quite impressive, including the 1972, the 1978, the 1998, and the 2017 vintage. But the wine that I enjoy most frequently from Castello di Monsanto is their outstanding Chianti Classico Reserva, which is always an exceptional value and which is a wine that I buy with confidence pretty much year in and year out. If you're interested in wine recommendations, wine collecting strategies, and learning more about wine, please do subscribe to my channel. I've been collecting wine for more than 15 years and also have a level 4 diploma from the WSET. So I have both formal certification as well as substantial practical knowledge from the School of Hard Knocks. Located in Rada in Chianti, Castello di Volpaia has 45 hectares of vineyards in Chianti Classico that are planted at about 400 meters above sea level and which feature the famous Glestro soils. Glestro soils are soils that include crumbly sandstone, clay, and marl. These conditions help to produce refined, elegant Sangiovese with impressive aromatics. Volpaia is a self-contained ancient village surrounded by walls, and the winery is located within historic buildings that are included inside the ancient walls. Notably, however, the winemaking equipment is modern and state-of-the-art, which is quite a surprise once you enter these historic buildings. Volpaia also has rooms and villas to rent and has a highly acclaimed restaurant as well. I've recommended the Volpaia wines on this channel on many other occasions, so I'm not going to get into too much detail about the wines in this video, but suffice it to say that the entire lineup is impressive. Next up is Baroni Ricasoli. While Baroni Ricasoli has a tasting area in Gaioli in Chianti, I strongly recommend that you go to Castello di Brolio and taste there instead. Castello di Brolio is in itself a historic attraction and well worth a visit. In fact, TripAdvisor rates Castello di Brolio as one of the top 10 tourist destinations in the entire world. This property has an interesting backstory, as the Ricasoli family acquired it hundreds of years ago because they had an alliance of sorts with the Medici in Florence, and this property has ideal vantage points to keep an eye on Siena, which is clearly visible in the distance. During my visit, we were able to taste through an impressive lineup of 8 or 9 wines in what was described as the Castello's small dining room, which, as a practical matter, was an incredibly large and ornate and lavishly decorated dining room that featured stunning views of the grounds below. Following the tasting at the Castello, we went to lunch at the winery's nearby restaurant. While it looks like a treehouse from the outside, this is actually a serious restaurant that has upscale cuisine with outstanding presentation. There we also were able to try a number of additional wines from this producer, including an impressive Trebbiano that was a white wine that was quite refreshing, as well as one of the most enjoyable Monsanto wines that I had last week. Like Monsanto that I discussed earlier in this video, Casa Emma is located in San Donato in Poggio. The winery is located right in the middle of the vineyards, so as you pull up, you'll be able to get a nice view of the vineyards, as well as the extremely rocky soils that feature some of the famous Albarese soils. Casa Emma is a big proponent of organic and biodynamic practices. Interestingly, they actually use a flock of domestic geese to help work the vineyards. I asked why they use geese rather than sheep, and they said it's because, unlike sheep, geese do not eat the grapes. But the geese do help to control harmful insects and also the weed population. They also fertilize the vineyards. Based on my tour of the winery in the barrel room, I discovered that Casa Emma has an emphasis on neutral oak and even amphora to mature their wines. Following the tour, we did a tasting, and it was interesting because you're able to compare wines that were matured in neutral oak on the one hand, and they even had a separate bottling that was matured exclusively in amphora. So you're able to compare the wines and see the impact that the different maturation vessels has on those wines. As much as I enjoyed the Chianti Classico wine lineup, it was a Merlot that was probably the most impressive wine I tasted at Casa Emma. Somewhat unusually, they grow their Merlot in rocky soils rather than clay soils, which is customary. The result was a Merlot that was impressive in that it had abundant acidity and freshness. When I'm planning my wine trips to different wine regions, I try to include a variety of different visits so that my experiences are not all duplicative and the same. So that means that while I try to include certainly some visits to some of the more well-established producers with big names, I also try to visit at least one smaller family-owned winery during each of my trips. In last week's visit to Chianti Classico, Pomona was the small family-owned producer that I visited, and Pomona is located in Castellina in Chianti. It has around 6 to 7 hectares of vineyards, and we were able to get an extensive vineyard tour with the owner, Monica Raspi. We must have walked at least 3 or 4 of the hectares of the vineyards because we were walking for probably 45 minutes to an hour. But it was good that we did because we were able to get a really good sense for the different growing conditions in terms of aspect and the type of soil that exists, even within the span of just a few hectares. In fact, the Pomona vineyards also span 2 different UGAs, so you're able to get a rare opportunity to compare wines from 2 different UGAs that are otherwise made in the exact same manner. And it was absolutely fascinating to do this tasting comparison and see how different these wines could be, despite the fact that the vineyards were so close together and they were made in the exact same way. Pomona's approach to winemaking emphasizes approachability and affordability. The wines are all matured in either neutral oak or stainless steel. As such, they're quite food-friendly and approachable even in their youth. If you're looking for not just a winery to visit for a tasting, but also a place to stay, another winery you'd want to consider is Castello Vicchiomaggio, which is located in Greve in Chianti. Castello Vicchiomaggio has a number of rooms and villas available for rent. They also have an on-site restaurant in addition to the winery, so you can dine there and also get your winery tour and visit in. Better still, they have an infinity edge pool, and the views from the patio and the pool are absolutely stunning. Castello Vicchiomaggio also conducts a number of weddings on their property, so if that's something you're looking for, you definitely want to give them some consideration. The wines at Castello Vicchiomaggio were also enjoyable. I particularly enjoyed the comparison of their Gran Seleziones. If you'd like to learn more about Chianti Classico and why I think this region has some of the most promising wines that will only continue to get better in quality, be sure to check out this video that's linked above, where I do a Chianti Classico deep dive.